All right, y'all, listen up. If you're serious about investing in high growth stocks, you need to learn how to break down a company's earnings and be able to spot opportunities like a pro. AMD just dropped its Q4 earnings, and as my stock pick of the year, I'm going to walk you through why I'm bullish on this company. Let's break it down. Take a look at AMD's financials. They just had their earnings. We want to, give you an inside look as to how I break certain things down and how I look at companies that I want to invest in for the long term. Keyword long term. This type of analysis is basically what I share with my community. We're going to look at AMD's earnings. We'll look at the charts. We'll look at some exclusive stuff that I had shared with the community before the earnings. We're going to look at other stuff like PE ratios and fundamental stuff, just so that all the information can start be put in together and you can have a better understanding. So right now you'll see this is AMD's fourth quarter for last year and their full year revenue and guidance and stuff like that. You could type in AMD into Google, investor relations, and then that will bring you to their company's website where they have all this information presented. So let's get going. First things first, AMD just reported record revenue of $7.7 billion for Q4 in 2024, which is up 24% year over year. So here I put a little note. Wall Street estimate was for them to hit 7.5 billion, right? And they hit 7.7, so that means they're beat, right? This was driven by insane growth in their data center business. We'll look into that a little bit soon, just so that you understand the different ways in which AMD makes their money. And the reason I mentioned Nvidia is because the data center segment is where AMD is competing with Nvidia, and they're trying to take market share away from Nvidia. So you're going to see the data center and the net revenue year over year, they're up 69%, which is fantastic. For the quarter, they're only up 9% from the previous quarter. So you'd like to see this in double digits. However, there might be reasons for this, but overall, the year over year growth is strong and healthy. So if you want a better understanding how AMD, what goes into the data center, it's mainly their GPU chips. They also have CPU chips, but their GPU chips is where they're trying to compete with Nvidia. So their MI300, their MI325, they just during their earnings, they said they moved up the timeline for the MI350s to be launched in the middle of this year, and their MI400s will be launched in 2026. If you don't know the difference between Nvidia and AMD, let me break it down for you real quickly. Nvidia with their GPU chips cost somewhere between 40 to 50,000, if not more. With AMD, their chips cost 10 to 20,000. So the reason my investing thesis is that AMD will eventually start to take market share away from Nvidia, because the only best alternative to Nvidia is AMD. There's no other question. So people may try to tell you otherwise, but when you're talking in terms of data center growth and GPUs, the next best option is AMD. Now, on the hardware side, it seems like they are catching up to Nvidia. However, on the software side is where Nvidia is dominant, and they have CUDA. So AMD has been making acquisitions recently to try to catch up. And while everyone just wants to lock Nvidia, rightfully so, as the boss, AMD does have the potential to eat away market share once they can start figuring out the software side. That's just my personal opinion. Overall, you see that growth of 69%, and that reflects their AI and cloud CPU sales, and is absolutely taking off. We love to see it. Meanwhile, AMD recently had a partnership with Dell. So the first time in Dell history, they are no longer using Intel CPU chips inside of their laptops and PC. They are now using AMD. To me, that was huge. That was massive news. So even though data center is where the high profit margins are, it's still good to know that AMD is solidifying them in the PC world. So while these two segments are doing really good, we cannot ignore the bad. So the gaming, AMD's chips are inside Xbox and PlayStations. So The majority of people who wanted Xbox and PlayStation 5, they pretty much have them already. So the Wall Street was expecting these numbers to be down, and I'm not surprised either. I was not expecting these numbers to do well. However, AMD is looking for these numbers, especially embedded, to maybe get, quarter over quarter, they were flat, they're down 13%. So I believe that coming towards the end of this year, they're looking to see that curve turn and they get more clients in the embedded segment. Gaming, me, not so much. I'm expecting more maybe in 2026 or when the new PlayStation and Xboxes come out. So what they said recently is they're going to combine the gaming sector with their client sector. However, they're going to keep it as transparent so you can see the difference between the two. Overall, to me, when you're looking at the surface, AMD did really well, especially for what the street was expecting. However, the stock still dropped basically 10% after its earnings, and we're going to take a look at that in just a bit. So while everyone's crowning Nvidia, and rightfully so, I just want to let everyone know I love Nvidia and I'm hoping Nvidia could get cheaper so I could buy more shares of Nvidia. However, everyone's crowning Nvidia as the winner and the only beneficiary to the AI wave that's happening right now in the stock market. I'm not in that camp. I believe AMD still has the chance, and based on the revenues right now and the partnerships that they're making, I think they have an opportunity to take market share and for them to grow as a business. So AI domination is just beginning. AMD's AI GPU revenue just crossed 5 billion and they're competing with Nvidia harder than ever. They have partnerships with Meta, Microsoft, and IBM, and that's what you can see here, where they're deploying that MI300, those GPU chips, into these larger enterprises. Now, the reason AMD's financial isn't looking anything remotely close to Nvidia is because it takes time for technology to get integrated in these cloud computing worlds. So everyone thinks stuff's supposed to happen or success is supposed to happen instantly. No, it takes time. It takes time for them to get in there, integrate, and then to work on the training of their inferences so that they can help benefit these companies so these companies can make more money. So also the other reason I really like AMD is their EPYC CPUs taking over data center. AMD now has over 50% market share at major cloud providers like AWS, which is Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. So you can see right here, they have strong growth and they're looking to continue growing. And that's something Lisa Su was very, very, very bullish on during her conference call. So the one thing that the takeaway you can get from here is while I had AMD as my stock pick of the year, I did have to lower my expectations for the first half of the year. Lisa Su had made a lot of references to the second half of 2025 and for a better 2026 and for future years where they're looking to grow tens of billions of dollars of revenue once they get integrated and once they're able to produce at mass scale the AI GPU chips that these companies need. So I try to break it down like this. If Nvidia is selling a chip for 40, 50,000 and AMD is able to figure out the hardware and the software side in due time at a much cheaper rate, why would companies only spend on Nvidia? Not saying they're not going to spend on Nvidia, but why would they only spend on Nvidia chips when they could get a great competitor? And AMD is the only thing closest to Nvidia. They could get a competitor at a much cheaper cost and more cost efficient. That's the reason why I'm huge on the semiconductor space, but I'm huge on the two titans. To me, Nvidia is the Michael Jordan of the chip world, and then AMD is the Kobe Bryant. Now, did one have a better overall career than the other? Yeah, but did one not achieve greatness at the same time? So that's just the way I look at it, and that's the way I reference it so that it makes more sense. So let's take a look at the chart. This is AMD on a weekly. I got the comments like, hey, your charting video with the white background was hard to see, so I went with the black. I'm listening. So make sure, if you guys want to see something a little bit different, make sure you put the comments in there so that I could pick up and I could provide better content. However, as you can see, since March 2024, AMD has been in a clear downtrend. What does that mean? It's making what we call lower lows, lower lows, lower highs, lower highs. So every time the stock comes here, it made a low, It came down here, it took out this low, creating a lower low, and then when it made a high, it came here to make a lower high. So it's been in a clear technical downtrend, which is something that I've been paying attention to. So hence the reason why I was still hopeful that the stock could come up with great earnings that would meet Wall Street expectation. I still had a hesitancy as to whether or not we're going to see the stock skyrocket, just this month. And it didn't. It dropped. So overall, what I'm seeing right now is before I was on the verge of saying, hey, if it hits 100, I'm gonna buy. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm taking Lisa Su's comments about the first half of 2025 very seriously. And the way I understand the stock market, and I think my personal edge when it comes to investing in certain is one, understanding financials, two, understanding technicals. But one of the most important things is understanding the economic side of things. So to me personally, I think the chip sector is going to have a rough half of the year. And maybe you may have a few winners in there, but I overall believe that chips will have a rough half of the year because they've had such a great last 2 years. So with that being said, I think you're going to see AMD get to $100, 101. That's where you're going to find, because that's essentially where support is, where you may find a small bounce. Investors may use that bounce to be able to sell their shares and wait for it to go lower if it goes lower. But ideally, you're going to see the stock get to, if it gets underneath 100, you're going to see the stock get to about 93 to about $95, right? The reason for that is that, and you could clearly see it here. Last time the stock was at $94, look what happened to the stock. It went up 143%. So it's very unlikely that this stock is going to get close to this level, 95 to $90. It's going to get close to this level and you're not going to see buyers step in. Does that mean that the stock is going to rocket from that point? It might. Who knows? There might be some good news that comes out around that time, which could create a catalyst for the stock. Me, however, I'm not in that camp as of yet, especially after listening to that earnings call. So ideally, the areas that I'm looking at is, let me get my rectangle. Areas that I'm looking at is any 100. So I got this box right here. So 95 to $90. So 95 to $90. That's the first area that I'm looking for. And then after that, I am basically going to be waiting for, let me draw my next box between right here, 80 to about $70. So let's say 69, 68, let's say 69. 80 to $70 range, and it might slip into the 68, 69. I'm not really trying to time the bottoms. I just like to pick ranges where I like to add to my position. For full transparency, if AMD gets below, that $90 mark, then I will be, even though I've been investing in this stock since 2022, I will be in the negative on my position. So now I will be having the cost to average down once it gets to the 80, 70, maybe potential 60 range. There's a lot of people right now who are calling for it to get to 54, 55. I'm not in that camp. But AMD right now, personally, to me, it's giving a lot of similar movements to Tesla of last year. When everyone was scared to invest in Tesla, if you remember, if you've been following me, I called the bottom on Tesla to, I think I was off by $2. I said I think it could get to as low as 140. It got to as low as 138. Now, these are two different stocks, two different companies, but however, just looking at these companies and studying their financials and trying to understand their technicals a lot better, I'm on the verge of believing we're going to see close to about $80 to $70, and that's where I personally will be adding heavily to my position. Now, I can be wrong. And competitors of AMD, who knows? Maybe the big companies like Amazon, Microsoft, they're creating their own chips. Maybe they don't need AMD. Maybe Nvidia continues to dominate the field and nobody needs to use AMD anymore. Based on the financials we just looked at, I don't see that. That's not that's not telling me this, while other people are telling me this, the financials are telling me differently. So I'm paying close attention to that. I'm paying attention to the roadmaps and what they're bringing out. Also paying attention to the next leg of AI, where Nvidia was basically doing a lot of the supplying the GPUs for a lot of the training of the LLMs that these companies use. I'm also looking at the inference aspect of it, which means okay, while ChatGPT is getting better and better, how is it going to help the clients and the customers be able to create more profit? And that's where the inference part. So if you want to do a little bit more research on your own, just type in LLM training versus inference training. And that will kind of give you as an insight as to what I'm looking at and why the reason I'm saying what I'm saying right now. So I know I just broke some news saying, hey, I think AMD could go to $70. And there was two type of investors right there. And then there were the people who went, oh my God, I can't believe this. And there were people who go, yes, yes. So let me know in the comments which type of investor you were. It's okay to be transparent. And the reason I say this is because if you're someone who was buying AMD under 120 and the news that it could get to 70 made you sick and make your stomach turn, then that's a clear signal to you that your portfolio should not have as much exposure to singular stocks as opposed to ETFs. Because if you're investing for the long term, when you see opportunities like this, if you're not getting really excited, then a lot of your portfolio should probably be concentrated in the ETF sector as opposed to a singular stock sector. So that's just something you want to keep in mind while you're becoming an investor, while you're going through your investing journey. And that's the stuff that I have. See, if you're in my investing community, you would see things a little bit differently because I provide these potential targets well ahead of time. So let's look at some of the notes that I share with my community in terms of bullish and bearish, right? We already looked. Data center AI business growing fast. We saw the proof. We saw the results, right? They have record PC shares. And if Dell continues to sell those new AI PCs and AI laptops, then AMD is going to only dominate the CPU side even more. Even though Nvidia is looking to get into that market also, just because of the cost pricing, I expect AMD to do really well and continue to hold that market share. And their AI GPUs scaling rapidly. And Lisa Su said, we're looking to expect hit tens of billions over the next few years. And that's why I said my investing thesis is not just for 1 year, even though I tried to do that. But typically, I'm looking at 3 to 5 years, if not more. However, we do have to look at the bearish aspect of it. So Intel and Nvidia are fighting back. So Intel's not just going to lay over and have AMD just take over the CPU side, right? So they're going to drop their prices, which is going to create, that it's going to affect the profitability of AMD because they're going to have a pricing power war in the beginning, at least in the first half of 2020. And Nvidia still is dominant in the high-end AI GPU space. So you could expect that to still affect the stock in the first, let's say, 3 to 6 months of the year. Margins will be under pressure as AMD is still investing heavily in AI, but short-term profitability will take a hit due to the fact they're reinvesting back into the company, and that's what R&D means, research and development. So they're putting it back into the company, and from a profitability aspect, you could expect a rocky first half of 2025. And Lisa Su made it very clear, just to seasonalities, these companies do go through high moments and low moments. The first quarter of 2025 is just a poor seasonal time. So hence the reason why I'm expecting the stock to go lower in the first half of 2025, which in my opinion creates great long-term opportunity for investors in the share. Overall verdict, AMD remains a high growth AI and cloud play, but watch for the short-term volatility. So if you don't believe me, here it is. This is literally the investing thesis that I have for AMD that I posted as of January 28th. You could come right here. You're going to see the last time it was modified by me was in January 28th, 2025. So before AMD had its earnings. So what I was looking at is that I looked to see what analysts were looking at. They at the time had a low of 110. So when you see analyst price targets, it's typically where they think the stock will be 6 to 12 months from now. And at that time, the lowest price target was 110, 175, 250. However, based on my charting analysis, I saw a potential and I told my investors this, hey, I see potential where AMD could get as low as 70, and then by the end of the year 175 220. Now the end of year target that I'm expecting is no longer 220. I'd send it out in my newsletter. I kind of put it down to the mean. I think we could get back to 170 by the end of the year. Who knows? We gotta wait and see, but I personally believe, but in the short term, because of the first half volatility that we're expecting, because of the pressure that I think the chip sectors may witness in due time, I think we could see AMD get as low as that. However, am I going to wait for that price? No. I already showed the price targets that I'm willing, at one price target, I'm willing to take, a bit of my cash, invest it here. And then at a lower price target, willing to put way more because I'm getting a cheaper price at that $80 to $70 range. So that's the stuff that I'm looking at right now. This is what I share with my community. I've started to share a lot more with my investing thesis for companies like Tesla, Nvidia, Microsoft. So you get all this, you get one-on-ones with me so that, we construct a portfolio that helps you sleep at night. A lot of people are just blindly trying to invest in certain companies without looking at the full grand scheme of it. And I know a lot of people don't have time for this. So that's where I step into the place because I love this. I really love the investing world. My analysis that I did on Tesla hit really well. And, we're hoping to see the same type of results for AMD for this year. So that's just some of the things that we look at. If you want, you could take the time and look at a couple other things here. So you could go to Yahoo Finance, and the one thing that I spoke about in one of my previous videos is PE ratio. This is a reason why I truly believe AMD can potentially go down, because when you're looking at PE ratio, this is called price to earnings ratio. So it's the price of the stock divided by the earnings, how much a company earned. So once you have a high PE ratio, investors typically like to see the PE ratio come down in order for them to be able to start investing. The way the PE ratio comes down is two ways. It's either the company earns more, so the bottom number, your earnings, if it's more, then you have a smaller PE ratio. Or the other thing is the stock price comes down. So if the stock price comes down, then this will become cheaper, and this is when investors will like to step in, because now you're seeing a company that is going through a growth inflection point, meaning their growth is now starting to kick up. However, because of where their growth is right now, investors don't want to pay a premium for this asset. They prefer to get cheaper. Now, you can't just look at PE ratios just by itself. You have to compare it to a company within the field. And this gives you a better idea of what I'm talking about. The PE ratio for Nvidia right now is 51. So investor would be like, why would I pay more for AMD when I could just pay for a company that's creating more revenue? I could pay a cheaper multiple for it. So that's the part that comes into the thesis where I'll be like, okay, investors want this price to come down cheaper. And here's part of the reason why. I believe if you go to these, let's go to, where would you find that? Analysis? I think it's analysis. The analyst price targets you could use here also to get better. At the time when I made my first, this was 110, but because after earnings it dropped to 90. And you see the average here is 150, and then the high is 225. The one thing I thought was interesting before this price target came out 90 is that AMD's price at that time was basically near 110. And after the company dropped after earnings, they downgraded the company a few times. Probably see that here. So there was analysts downgrading the company afterwards, but they were downgrading it to price that the stock was already under. So let's just say if the stock was at 107, they were downgrading the stock to 150, 160, 170. So to me, that was just like slight clues as to, hey, they still value this company, but when you do downgrades on a company's stock, it will push the stock lower. So to me, institutions are intentionally trying to get the stock cheaper so that they can buy it at the right premium that they think is where the company is valuable. So just so you know, I break this down in detail and I explain to my clients as best as possible, to my investing community as best as possible, where I share real-time updates on stocks like AMD. If you want to stay ahead of the game and not trying to guess and figuring out what's the best place, then you can either book a one-on-one with me where I give you as much information as possible, or you could join my investing community where the link will be in the description below. So here's a gem for those who were able to stick around. Right here in the statistics tab, we're going to look here at, so the P ratio that we looked at was 107, which means this is extremely high, right? But here's a key part. The forward PE ratio is 23.15. So the forward PE ratio is what investors are looking at for the future. So from a future perspective, this is a lot lower, which means that they're valuing this company they're expecting this company to have a lot of growth in the future, because you have a high P premium right now, but you have a relatively stable PE ratio for AMD. So what I looked at is I'm like, okay, you know what? If I think AMD's coming down to that, 80 to 70 bucks, what I did was I picked 72. I said, okay, if AMD comes on to 72 bucks, what would the PE ratio be? So this PE ratio will be about 37, and then the forward PE ratio will be about 11.5. That to me is what you call an undervalued company. For the company that has massive double digit growth right now, they're expected to make tens of billions of dollars in the next, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years. That's the type of financials that companies are looking at, or institutions are looking at, where they are looking to dive in and buy stock. And that's why I could invest in a company like AMD and sleep peacefully at night, just because I believe in the leadership. I believe in Lisa Su. For the people who are saying Lisa Su needs to lose their job, y'all need to cut it out. Y'all don't understand what's really going on underneath the hood of these type of companies. These companies are working on complex problems and it takes time. A lot of people just don't have patience. But in my investing community and here at Money Mind Resources, we share that wealth of knowledge so that people could make sound, proper investing decisions based on analysis that a lot of institutions. So if earnings keep growing as expected, a drop to about $72 could be a major buying opportunity because the stock would be much cheaper relative to its profits. But if growth slows, the market might be revaluing AMD lower for that reason. That's the reason you could potentially get it to about 54 bucks. I don't think we get there, but it doesn't matter what I think. But this is why I look at both PE ratios and growth outlook before making investment decisions. I break down these kind of insights in my investing community, like I said. Or if you want to, create a proper portfolio so that fits your investing needs, make sure you book a one-on-one with me. The link will be in the description below. Appreciate y'all. Please understand, I understand that this was a high level type analysis. Not everyone is there, especially as this is a beginner page. But there's been a lot of people DMing me trying to figure out, hey, what's going on? And it took me, I took the whole weekend to go through everything to make sure I did my homework and show the part of the process of what I do as to when I'm evaluating company. Me, I'm going to be aggressive with my investments. I feel comfortable with what I've learned and what has been working for me. All of my stock picks that I've recommended for folks, or what I've looked at, the majority of them have done extremely well, if not all of them. This is the only one that seems to be the lagger, and I understand the reason why. So remember, here at Money Mind Resources, invest smarter, earn more, live free. Catch y'all.